Jonathan's heart raced against his chest as the drone's camera zoomed in on the forest below. Nestled among the leaves and branches was something that made his blood run cold. "No way," he whispered. This revelation changed everything. Was he really seeing what he thought he was? This definitely didn't belong among the muted greens and browns of the woods. He had to alert the authorities immediately. With trembling fingers, Jonathan fumbled for his phone, his mind reeling. How could something so small unleash such devastating implications? Lives hung in the balance. As Jonathan struggled to dial 911, his eyes stayed glued to the screen. He strained to understand what he was seeing half hidden in the underbrush. "How?" he stuttered. Alarm bells went off in his mind as details registered through the shock. "Where?" He couldn't even finish his sentences and kept stammering. All he knew was that he had to warn someone before it was too late. Jonathan knew time was running out. Gripping the phone tighter, he connected to 911 and prepared to describe the finding that would change everything. Just yesterday, he had been eagerly opening the box containing his brand new state-of-the-art drone. He ordered it on a whim, hoping the pricey gadget might help revive his flatlining journalism career. Ever since Jonathan had been laid off from the Charmouth Gazette, he had been struggling to rekindle his passion for reporting. Most of his story pitches were rejected, and the checks from his freelance work barely covered his grocery bills. But he had a plan that initially seemed innocent, yet later resulted in many sleepless nights. On a rainy spring morning, it all became clear to Jonathan Ford. He rubbed his eyes tiredly while reviewing his most recent article pitches. Every one of them had been rejected by the editors he had approached. But that wouldn't be the case for much longer. His journalism career was stuck in a downward spiral, and he desperately needed a breakthrough. Since Jonathan lost his job at the Charmouth Gazette, he scraped by selling occasional stories as a freelancer, but nothing seemed to grab editors' interest anymore. Jonathan knew he needed to find something big and explosive to pitch, a real game changer. But in a small town like Charmouth, explosive stories were hard to come by. Still, he was determined to turn things around, and he would do so very soon. He refused to give up on his passion for writing and reporting. There were bound to be fascinating stories hidden somewhere in the salty air and murky depths of this coastal town. Little did he know that the real story was something far beyond fascinating. It was something he wasn't ready for. That's when his thoughts shifted. He began to look more at the natural world around him that greatly influenced life in Charmouth. So Jonathan began toying with an idea. The rocky shores and churning seas surrounding Charmouth often bred intense, unpredictable storms. Rogue waves and storm surges threatened boats and sometimes damaged the historic lighthouse perched on the cliffside point. If he could capture exclusive footage of the storm's thrashing fury using brand new technology, maybe that would entice newspaper editors to take a chance on him again. Which is how Jonathan found himself unboxing a gleaming new high-tech drone one morning, fresh off a risky purchase with his dwindling savings. This had to work. The X500 model promised Ultra HD 4K video and 12-megapixel photos, even in low-light conditions. As he charged and configured the drone, Jonathan's anticipation built. He decided today would be the perfect inaugural flight to test it out. Ominous gray thunderclouds were gathering over the bay, and weather reports warned of a powerful oncoming storm. The gusting winds would make piloting the drone tricky. But they would also churn up enormous waves crashing against the cliffs. exactly the intense, dramatic seascapes he hoped to capture on camera. Jonathan had no clue of the massive impact this flight would have on many lives in Charmouth, because what the drone's camera ended up recording was something he could never have guessed, or the tricky situation it would cause. Jonathan slipped on his jacket, grabbed the drone remote, and headed for his favorite perch atop the lighthouse point. The biting sea winds stung Jonathan's face as he climbed the steep path to the lighthouse point. Gripping his jacket tighter, he pushed onward with the X500 drone tucked under his arm. This model had to impress, or his career wouldn't recover. Reaching the clifftop overlook, Jonathan paused to catch his breath. The darkening sky stretched before him. Now was the moment of truth. With a deep breath, he launched the sleek black X500 into the gloomy heavens. The drone rose steadily, its lights flickering in the dusk. "Show me you were worth it," Jonathan muttered. The drone shuddered as Jonathan launched it into the brewing tempest. Gnawing winds buffeted the aircraft, threatening to hurl it into the rocky cliff face. Gritting his teeth, Jonathan wrestled with the controls. He had to steady the drone before disaster struck. "Come on, hold it together," he urged under his breath. The drone spiraled drunkenly, tilting at a nauseating angle. Jonathan's knuckles whitened as he clenched the remote tighter. One fatal crash could doom his future. With a desperate heave, he wrenched the drone level again. Its lights flashed erratically as it hovered against the dark skies. Jonathan let out a shaky breath. That was too close. But he couldn't quit now. The perfect shot was still out there somewhere. Peering through the camera feed, he scoured the churning seas. Towering waves smashed against the rocks, spraying mist high into the air. It was treacherous, but breathtaking. Jonathan swallowed hard. Maybe he shouldn't have come alone. Doubt crept in as the drone wavered unsteadily. Had he put himself at risk again too soon? Jonathan's fingers trembled as he edged the drone toward the cliff's sheer edge. Frigid sea spray needled his face, but he had to get the shot. Peering through the camera zoom, his eyes widened. Colossal waves smashed against the rocks hundreds of feet below, bursting into magnificent plumes of white water. This is it, he thought. No more playing it safe. He just needed to edge the drone a little closer. Holding his breath, Jonathan nudged the drone closer to the dizzying precipice. His doubts resurfaced, but he shook them off. "I can do this. The perfect shot is within reach." The drone inched nearer the crashing surf. Jonathan's eyes never left the screen. But then he suddenly felt the aircraft yanked sharply to the right. "No, no, no!" Jonathan shouted in dismay as the drone spiraled out of control. The screen went black. He'd lost the signal. Now the drone was at the wind's mercy, lost in the gathering storm. Jonathan felt his heart sink. Did he just mess up his final opportunity? Once more, his desire for the perfect story might end in disaster. Overwhelmed, Jonathan fell to his knees. Should he go after it? Or should he give up and back off? The consequences of both options burdened him, while the wind roared around him. Desperately working the controls, Jonathan scanned the darkening skies as raindrops pelted his face. "Come on, where are you?" He had to get the drone back before it was destroyed or washed out to sea. Just when Jonathan was ready to abandon hope, the display abruptly blinked back to life. "Yes!" he cried out, as the drone's camera feed reappeared through static. The aircraft was being battered haphazardly over the forest, far from the cliffs. Grabbing the controls, Jonathan manually steered the drone back toward the coast as rain blurred the camera view into a smeary mosaic. His relief was palpable. He hadn't destroyed the expensive gadget in his recklessness, after all. As the lighthouse came back into sight, Jonathan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. But circling lower, the drone's camera panned over an object half hidden in the trees. Jonathan froze. There was something off about it that gave him pause. An uneasy feeling settled in the pit of his stomach.